been quite interesting actually to listen to previous panels. I was kind of wondering how long was it going to take before someone actually mentioned ESG, sustainability, purpose, and it took a while, but eventually we got there. It's quite interesting to hear about the challenge around talent. We know that talent is a big issue, and that was mentioned a couple of times about how important it is to ensure that attracting talent to your organisation is really important, and the focus on a sense of purpose. But that was kind of interesting. So we're going to kick off now and get into this discussion, Sabine, and really building a sustainable future, the power of ESG. So that's kind of where we're going to focus our discussion for the next half an hour or so. And I guess the question we're asking ourselves is what does sustainable future look like? What role does ESG play in this? Even more importantly, what role does business play in delivering our ESG or our sustainable future? And for me at least, underpinning this question is the challenge and the role of business and the balance between satisfying your ESG principles, your challenge around protecting our environment and making money. The question we're going to tackle here is, are the two mutually inclusive or mutually exclusive? Can we have a great ESG strategy whilst we're delivering sustainable profits? And I think that's where we're going to venture into this. I'm delighted to welcome the most amazing panel, three of us here. I'm starting with Sabine. So she's known as the insure tech queen. It's like, she'll explain what it's all about. But she's the CEO of Alchemy Crew and also runs a tech lab, and we'll hear from you in just a moment. And then we have Parag Gogate, who works for AgeVolt and is responsible for international growth and partnerships. And AgeVolt, he'll explain, is basically electric charging system. And Anthony Burns, who's the Chief Operating Officer of a company called ACS, a company you've never heard of, but they provide 80% of all of the hiring out suits, dresses that any one of us might want for a wedding or ascot. 80%, I was fascinated about the number. He's got the most amazing and fascinating business model he's going to talk to us all about. So each of the panelists is going to give us 2 minutes, just 2-3 minutes, just tell us about their businesses, because I think it's important we understand where they sit within this sort of continuum of ESG and business. And then we're going to dive into a series of questions. I'm going to start with Sabine, and then we'll go to Parag, and then we'll go to Anthony. Sabine, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sabine VanderLinden. I've been working actually in insurance for 25 years. And 7 years ago, I went to build acceleration program and incubators. So I built two very well-known incubators in the UK and the United States. And just before COVID, set up Alchemy Crew. And what we do is we build R&D and adoption labs where big corporations, Fortune 500, can learn to adopt technology much faster and implement it, democratize it, industrialize it across multiple countries. So therefore, what happened with the labs is that we help, in many cases, deal with sustainability. So sustainability is one of the problems we are trying to solve for. Now, the InsurTech Queen, well, I've been working in insurance, as I said, for a long time. And I built a massive following, having accelerated over 150 startups, helped raise over $150 million. And so in my industry insurance, I am renowned as one of the small influencers.
Excellent. So you help, you not only got this tech sort of incubator, but also you're helping attracting investment into organisations that you're supporting, which is. And incidentally, if anyone's got any questions, please use the app and ask us some questions. Great to have your questions that pop up. Let's go to you, Parag. Tell us a bit about your business and your role. We'll probably just come straight on, so just talk straight into it.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you.
Hi everyone. This is dangling my behind me. So we are AgeVolt. AgeVolt is a Slovakian startup founded in 2019, so quite young compared to some of you out here. We are into electric vehicle charging solutions, so some of you may already be using those, charging your cars. We provide a combination of hardware, so that's your chargers, as well as the software, things like mobile applications and digital platforms. We are mostly into the B2B sector. We kind of specialize on large scale installations, so you have multiple chargers in premises. And one of our uniqueness is around energy management systems, so this is where we look to optimize energy usage in terms of charging, but also the cost, total cost of ownership. We are operational outside Slovakia in 5 different countries in Central Eastern Europe, so Lithuania, Czech Republic. We also have operations in Kenya, in East Africa, Turkey, in Asia and India. But the way we have done this, which I'll be speaking more about, in a sustainable way. So what I mean by that is, sustainability is obviously core to us as an organization, what we do in terms of charging and how we are helping with the decarbonization of transport, but equally looking at how we grow internationally in a sustainable way, not only financially. We are a startup, so as you can imagine, the resources are finite, financial and people, but also the kind of partnerships we have established in these different countries. We've taken a very different approach, and I'd like to share that.
Thank you, thanks very much. Anthony, tell us a bit about your business.
Thanks, Guy. Well, I'm Tony, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of ACS, and ACS, we enable circular business models in the fashion industry, like clothing rental, clothing resale, clothing repair, re-commerce. They're all inherently sustainable. We're probably the largest organisation of our type in Europe, arguably globally, because no one else does everything that we do under one roof. Firstly, the fashion industry gets a horrific reputation for the damage it does to not only the environment, and there's lots of terrible stats about it, second biggest polluter globally after oil, contributes more to CO2 emissions than aviation and shipping put together. That's from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But also, socially, the damage it does to hundreds of millions of workers in fashion supply chains across the globe who have been paid substantially less than a living wage and continue to be paid less than a living wage. So the models which we facilitate are inherently sustainable, but we're endeavouring to deliver them in a sustainable way because, one, it's the right thing to do as a good corporate citizen, but also it's how we will accelerate the adoption of these models by our partners, the brands and retailers we work with. Sustainability, environmentally, it's biodiversity around our facility. It's our journey to net zero. It's how we save on water. From a social perspective, it's our impact on our local communities. It's who we recruit, how we recruit from disadvantaged backgrounds, how we have refugees on site. We have refugees from Ukraine, Uganda, Afghanistan, Syria. We have 16% of our workforce are registered with disabilities. So these things are in some ways more important than just growing our revenue and growing our bottom line.
Great, that's fantastic. We'll explore that business model in a moment. I just want to get some definitions out of the way quickly, because I haven't asked you this question before. Can you each very quickly define ESG for me? So, Sabine, just tell us, in your view, what's ESG?
Environmental, social, and governance structure. So, environmental. So, most of the activities which are taking place at the moment, I think, are around what we call environmental ESG. So, flooding. So, looking at it through flooding, wildfire, earthquake, so all these stuff are environmental. As we know, with the current climate situation, they are more current and they are more often social innovations, including people like me in your organization, diversity, equity, inclusion, but also identifying some of the things we've heard before. How do you adapt your business model and your workforce to meet the needs of the future? Governance and policies, and how everything is going to
wraps around that and how you deliver it. Do you want to add to that at all? Is there anything that Sabine's missed, Parag?
I think Sabine has done a great job in explaining. I would add ESG more also looking at your communities that you work within, and for those who are internationally present, like in our case, it's also about the impact you may or may not have in the countries you operate. I'll extend that definition.
We'll come to the local piece in a moment. I mean, it sounds like your business has just got ESG, sustainability at the centre of it. which is great. I mean, you've built it around the principle of the circular economy. Just tell us a bit about the challenge of making money whilst protecting our planet, whilst ensuring you're employing local labour, whilst having a net zero car. I mean, are the two issues inclusive? Can you make money while delivering for the planet and people, or are they kind of got to do one or the other and somehow you've got to compromise on your return on investment? Tony?
Well, absolutely. We don't think we need to choose between profitability and sustainability. We actually were probably unconsciously competent in terms of sustainability because we were on a journey where we started thinking, how can we save money? How can we cut back on our use of utilities? How can we cut down on the waste we generate? And we started doing these things and we realised that they actually made us more sustainable. At the same time, we won some environmental business awards and we continue to do more on that front. We realised that sustainability is how we can compete with large third-party logistics companies 100 times the size of us, and it's what...
So you realised that you can compete using sustainability. Just explain that a little more. So,
well, what we do, we use innovative ways of running our operations within the fashion industry, not just the models, but actually how we go about cleaning garments, sanitising garments, how we do it with net zero in all our thoughts, how we cut down on our use of consumables, our use of emission, our use of electricity, gas, etc.
So I've got a challenge then for you. So here I am, I've got a daughter, so you probably might buy stuff for you. She can go to Primark, or she can come to you get your sort of recycled fashion. How do you respond to that demand and the fickle way that fashion moves around? What's your offer to my daughter, so to speak?
Well, it's a difficult one. First thing is the biggest blocker to the adoption of circular business models like rental is awareness. Probably most people in this room wouldn't realise you can rent items from M&S, Karen Millen, Alchemy.
Excuse me, panel. Apparently the hotel are about to do a fire test, so please do not panic. It is just a test. And sorry to interrupt, but please carry on.
Thank you very much. So we'll pause when the fire alarm goes off. No one's allowed to leave the room, by the way. So you're just saying, all these different organisations.
The biggest blocker is people don't know. There's a lack of awareness. But subscription rental is a panacea for the analogy you gave me with your daughter. Subscription rental allows people to access fashion at a fraction of the cost. They can consume fashion in a way that they can only do otherwise by buying items. So they can get lots of items rotated on a regular basis. It's like a revolving wardrobe, and they have low commitment with them in terms of they can swap them out as much as they want, and it's how your daughter can access really designer fashion in lieu of damaging the planet and maybe buying from brands where they've got lower price point.
So it's a kind of disruptive business model you've developed, isn't it? And I think disruption for you, Sabine, is sort of, it might even be your middle name, I dare say.
Yeah.
So tell us about, in your market, which is insurance, how you are using sustainability ESG to disrupt what is a traditional way of just insurance, reinsurance, that whole world.
Yeah, so following on from Anthony, so insurance companies insure individuals, but they also insure corporations. And some of the work we are doing is looking at fashion, smart fashion. We are looking at transport. We are looking at a variety of industries that are insured by those corporations, and actually looking at what is going to disrupt the behavior of the corporation to take insurance, which means that we need to also be innovative in the way we build products and services. So insurance companies will be looking at the industry of fashion and evaluate whether they are ESG compliant. So looking at platforms such as S&P, we are going to look at the rating for those organizations. But what we also have found out is that a lot of the risks which are there are not insurable. So we have a lot of new emerging risks coming to market which are not insured.
So are you saying that some ESG stuff is not insurable?
Correct.
Just tell us a bit about how that might hold the industry back unless we kind of work out how to insure it.
Yeah, so a big example that probably everybody has read in the press is a lot of insurers are not insuring mining companies anymore, or mining companies with no strategy to demonstrate how they are going to get off mining. And so when you actually have a mining project which costs billions of dollars and you can't find the insurance line to your financing, well, it's a problem. So you have a lot of repercussion around ESG where companies are changing their policies to be able to meet the ESG criteria. Fossil fuel, for example, fueled by Schneider Electric, and all those companies had to move away from fossil fuel, and the insurance company need to find a way to insure the new business model.
Oh, okay.
So technology are being used now to do that.
So we'll come back to the technology. Well, let's keep the theme of technology and jump to you, Parag. And just in terms of, you've got the e-charging technology for electric vehicles. And you were talking about a strategy for moving internationally, I think, and some of the challenges around that. So just tell us a bit about what you're facing as a business to try and get sort of the environmental side of things developed further.
Yeah, sure. So for us, sustainability, looking internally, we had to think how we design a product. So yes, we are helping the sustainability cause in terms of charging, but we also had to think the chargers we develop are modular in design, so that means you can kind of build it up like Lego pieces and break it down if you have to. And that increases circularity because if components advance in terms of technology, you can swap them. So that's how we've been thinking on the product design. From a technology perspective, when we started to look for internationalization, it kind of didn't make sense to us that we manufacture those chargers in EU and send them, say, in Asia or Africa or wherever. And those different markets are at different maturity levels in terms of e-mobility adoption. Not everything what works in Europe works everywhere else. So we took an approach where we sourced partners which are not your traditional distributors of electrical goods and components, but individuals or organizations who had something different to offer, where we could produce these chargers locally with our technology transfer and know-how. So that we were able to cut down carbon emissions quite drastically. That was one example. If I take an example of Turkey, we partnered up with a company that they do solar panel installations. So for us, it was quite nice to tie with a renewable energy provider that could charge the cars, as an example.
So you're finding organisations who can have kind of goals that are aligned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm just going to start going to some questions. We've got a couple of questions in and just ask it, and one ties into this because I'm really interested in this issue of greenwashing, or let's call it social, or just sort of we say one thing, but actually we're not doing it at all, which is a risk, which is a challenge for all businesses. And so here's a question from Ricardo, who said, should companies track the impact of ESG programs they adopt and prove that they're being delivered? So let's talk to Sabine first about that. What's your view about the importance of tracking? Then we go to how you actually track it. Thanks, Nathan.
It is very important to try to measure. And as I highlighted, you have already some platforms that are available for company to buy, as a SaaS model, to be able to evaluate how other companies are actually rated from an ESG rating viewpoint. However, that is not the only solutions, right? When I look at the sector I serve, we have to look at the data, right? We also look a lot at, what is available out there to help us make better decisions. So we source, for example, a lot of geospatial data. We will look at algorithmic trading or algorithmic platform to allow us to use that data and actually positioning and identifying what would be the right price for a product. We look at circularity, we look at monetization. All those bit comes together to start building the right product and services which are not existing today. So we have new rates, right?
And tell me, do you, of your incubated, of the companies that you're kind of incubating, do you assess their ESG credentials? How do you go about working out whether they're ready to deliver or able to deliver around ESG issues?
Very good question. So earlier in the early stage startup are thinking about that as they are building their platforms actually.
Okay.
And so as they enter the incubator or the adoption lab, which are financed by corporate, right? So we have a series of activities and evaluation criteria we have to go towards because you cannot damage the reputation of a Fortune 500.
No, we can understand. Tony, so just this issue of measuring and reporting and avoiding green, I mean, it's actually really important in the world of fashion, right?
Absolutely. The Competitions and Markets Authority are currently investigating ASDA, Boohoo, ASOS over claims of greenwashing. We are acutely aware of greenwashing in the fashion industry. When we started on our net zero journey, we calculated all our emissions, scope 1, 2 and 3. We used an independent company to independently and externally verify those emissions. We've got that for the environmental side of things, but we also use another organisation to look at everything we do socially, and they are very stringent in terms of how they go about this, but we use the reporting that they give us as a tool to then tackle all our emissions, and we've actually now got to the stage where 99.5% of our emissions is actually now all scope 3. So as an SME,
So what's that percentage?
99.5%.
In your are in scope 3?
Yeah.
So, does everyone know what scope 3 means, by the way? So why did you very quickly give everyone you've got 30 kind of 1 minute to do this, no more. Scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 of the GHG protocol. Really quickly.
Scope 1 and 2 are mainly, we can control a lot more of them. Scope 1 would be the electricity we use, Scope 2 would be the gas we use, so we've moved to renewables, which means they're virtually zero. Scope 3 emissions are things like us using shipping partners like DPD. Our Scope 3 emissions with DPD are their Scope 1 emissions. So our Scope 3 emissions are our consumables like plastic and cardboard. Our Scope 3 emissions are our staff commute. Our staff commute is our second biggest Scope 3 emission. We're trying to tackle things like that to incentivise people.
No, it's supply chain basically.
Yeah.
Scope 3, yeah. And what about you and you're helping deliver the net zero journey, aren't you?
We are,
Talk
but
to us a bit about that.
we are also measuring it. So as an example, the project we have in Kenya with the partner is specifically aligned to the UN SDG goals because it's partly funded by Slovak aid agency. So we have 5 different SDG goals and we have to track and measure, for example, the carbon emission I've already mentioned because it's about climate impact, number 1. Number 2 is how we create local jobs in the economy, so have equal gender distribution in terms of manufacturing. So there are men and women equally employed. That is another objective we have. Third one is around the industry and the infrastructure. So in this instance, the EV charging and how that helps the Kenyan e-mobility market and penetration of EVs. So we have all these different metrics that we have to have data to be able to show the impact. The biggest problem I see generally is lack of data, transparency, reliability, consistency. All that adds to the problem of either companies greenwashing intentionally or perhaps a little naivety as well, that because they don't have the data, they can't.
Yeah.
They just say what they have to say.
And the last thing we want is ESG to be undermined by greenwashing.
Yeah.
A question in from Susan, and Sabine, I'll throw this at you, all of you in the first bits. Have you had to consider cultural differences when developing your initiatives? So I think around the labs and what you do. So talk to me a bit about cultural differences.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big part, and I do labs which are international. So when we evaluate ventures to bring into the lab, we have to look at ventures from all around the world. The nice thing is when you develop labs in 10 countries, which is what I've done last year for one single Fortune 500, you have to actually accept that people are different. And the nice thing is you end up working with people within the organization which are into those business units, right? International business units. So what we have to do is making sure that we take the concrete goals and values and make sure we have diversity. So for example, some of my labs have to be 50% women-owned ventures. When we look at sustainability, for instance, as well, we need to make sure that when we look at the board formation of startups, if it's male only, we need to look at the rest of the team. So those are considerations we definitely take into consideration when we build those labs. But we take the criteria, right? We look at the criteria and then build an app based on this.
Okay, good. And Parag, does culture play into your decision making at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite somebody on the panel earlier mentioned cultural intelligence. I think that's an excellent word that we had to bear in mind in terms of selecting partners. Not criteria for selection, but appreciation and acknowledgement that what works in Turkey will not work in Kenya, will not work in India, will not work in Lithuania. It's absolutely different places. So in terms of ESG sustainability, the wider society, the wider communities, we have to sort of make an effort to understand what works there and how initiatives could be tailor-made to the local, regional and local variations.
Makes sense. Tony, you've opened the net zero carbon sort of like Pandora's box here. So I've got a question from Anonymous that says, with scope 1 and 2 being the low-hanging fruit, how can we address the need to pick the scope 3 ripe fruit that is far above our heads? So tell us a bit about how you're dealing with that scope 3.
Well, Scope 3 is certainly more challenging. Our biggest Scope 3 emissions are consumables. We put plastic bags or poly bags on our garments because the seasonality of them means they get dust and they get covered in dust. Over time, if they're not used from September through to maybe May, we've looked at ways of removing poly. First of all, we recycle it locally. We turn it into new bags again, but there's still CO2 emissions associated with that. So we're looking at now installing dust extraction so we can actually treat the problem at source, i.e. you don't need bags if you can take the dust out of the air. And now that we've transitioned to renewable electricity, then there's no emissions associated with running these machines, but they do cost money. Staff commute, our second biggest Scope 3 emission. We're now giving our staff free lunches if they use public transport, if they cycle to work, if they walk to work, to try and just incentivise them to help us.
So you're getting people to buy into it, aren't you? It's the whole business. It's how you're doing business, not just what you're doing, right? Yeah, sounds really important.
If I can just add to what Anthony said, Scope 3 are also your supply chain. So those who have complex supply chains spanning different countries upstream and downstream, engagement with your supply chain is absolutely critical. Without that, you will not achieve emission reduction in Scope 3. And as Anthony said, 80-90% of those emissions are in your supply chain.
And that's where there's the biggest opportunity.
So we've got a minute and a half left, and I'm going to give you each 45 seconds to tell us about the biggest opportunities around ESG. Let's start with you, Anthony, and then we'll go to Sabine and then you, Parag. Tell us the biggest opportunity that these guys can get hold of.
Well, our biggest opportunity is to realise our potential in terms of the impact we can have to the fashion industry, because our goals and ambitions are around realising a just transition to the fashion industry environmentally and socially, making a difference. So that's what we are keen to realise.
Okay, brilliant. Sabine?
For me, when you look at risk transfer and risk mitigation, it has to be around Scope 3 supply chain, because you are involving a lot of parties within whatever you do, and therefore you need to leverage the right technology to drive the transparency of risk and find the best way to find your future insurance.
Fantastic, that's great. Parag?
Yeah, I mean, for us, ESG offers an opportunity for imagining new possibilities. Yes, it's compliance driven in many instances, and I've been in those places, but I like to invite you to sort of think differently and think what you could imagine, a new future, new business models. In our case as a startup, we didn't have enough resources to open up new markets, but we managed to do that in 1 year, 5 different countries. Yes, they are still on a journey. I'm not saying they all are revenue generating, profit generating, but it allowed us to think, so to speak, outside the box and say, oh, hang on a second, we could do something interesting. So I think for me, the opportunity is that.
Good.
Imagine new possibilities.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I hope you've all convinced by the ESG sort of story journey we've had here. 3 amazing businesses that are really putting it right at the centre of their business models. So can I thank Anthony, Sabine, and also Parag for a fantastic discussion. And we'll let you now go to lunch. Thanks very much indeed.